Hey guys, welcome back to FPL Fran. Today's video is going to be my Game Week 30 team selection, and I'll be talking about, first of all, my Game Week 29 team review before I head on to talk about Game Week 30 and beyond and what I kind of have in plans for this sort of team and the team structure that I have in place. Now, of course, I did take a bench boost for Game Week 29, and overall it was quite successful. I got 137 points, took a -8, of course, so 145 -8. Ultimately, the hits didn't pay off at all, so I went for Shaw, Fernandes, and Madison. Fernandes practically played DM 2 games. Looks like a very bad transfer on paper. Shaw, an even worse transfer because he might be injured. And then with Madison, it's an interesting situation because, of course, Rodgers has been fired, but there isn't really seemingly a good manager coming in instead. And with Madison, of course, having the best game on his calendar in terms of Bournemouth at home, I do love having Madison for this game here, but I did, of course, lose Saka. However, Saka does play Liverpool, so that's a little bit redeeming there. My main concern, of course, is going to be something like Game Week 31, where Saka gets the chance to play versus West Ham, so that's concerning. Maybe I'll have to think about Fernandes if I really have to. Fernandes isn't exactly an appealing asset whatsoever, so maybe a transfer out of Fernandes sooner than later would make sense. But at the same time, on Game Week 31, it's a bad fixture for Madison, so one where I would probably actually consider going out of Madison first. If I look at my team, though, in terms of captaincies and things like that, very happy that I went out and captain Mitoma at the end. It was between really Rashford and Mitoma. Even McAllister at one point was someone that I considered, but like I was talking about in the team selection video, those were the two players I was considering, and maybe if I felt that Rashford was out, that I would play Fernandes instead. But I actually flip-flopped between Mitoma at the end, went for Mitoma at the buzzer. 2 points there, a little bit of a positive. However, Shaw, I think, was the main man who sort of let the team down because ultimately I didn't really want to take another hit for Zinchenko because I did see him playing for my team just in case I had issues in Game Week 31. And now that I have issues with someone like Shaw, it seems like I will need to call upon Zinchenko sooner than later. And I might even, for example, play him in this upcoming game week, although I don't think that's really that likely. So Shaw's injury is really tough, and also I just missed out simply on a clean sheet, whereas other people could have gone for Lisandro Martinez or De Gea and benefited from that due to United getting that clean sheet versus Brentford. So that was a little bit disheartening, but I think the rest of the team made sense, and I'm still happy to own Steele, and so thankful for his assist to Mitoma as well. That was pretty much perfect when it comes to captaincy. Watkins having such a fantastic week makes him an option to think about when we talk about captaincy. But it was nice to see Rashford once again going back to scoring. Although I would say United really looked quite dull from a creative edge. You could see it in the expected goals. Nothing exceptionally high for United. They were, of course, dealing with quite a competent defense versus Brentford, and Everton are, of course, a different class of defense when you compare it to, let's say, Newcastle and Brentford. But that does not really bode well for going for Rashford, for example, who I would say probably has just a bit of a worse game than, let's say, Watkins on paper versus Nottingham Forest, who have been much worse defensively as of late. If I head on now towards my Game Week 30 team selection, though, and we'll start with my defense. Of course, there's a huge asterisk here on Shaw. So Shaw is most likely not going to play versus Everton because of his substitution in the Brentford game and the injury that he suffered in that game. So I will most likely be playing Trippier and Chilwell. And if you look at the state of my defense and how I've lined it out, I do plan on playing Botman ahead of Zinchenko. I just think that Botman versus Brentford is probably a better fixture than, let's say, Zinchenko at Anfield. Even though Zinchenko might have a slightly higher attacking edge, I just think that Botman will probably have a better fixture, better chance of getting a clean sheet there. So I do think Botman is the best of those two players. So that's how the asterisk for Shaw is really going to go. As far as the midfield, though, and actually, sorry, just to touch on Kepa, for example, who he is in an interesting situation now because Lampard has been hired as the interim manager, or rather rehired as the interim manager. And a lot of people will be thinking that it's doubtful that maybe Kepa will play because for whatever reason, we know that Kepa didn't have the best relationship with Lampard. But I think that was purely because Kepa was really suffering from such poor form and showcasing such poor form that Lampard was pretty much forced to go for another keeper. I do think Kepa will likely stay. However, I still have Steele, who's perfectly competent. But when it comes down to it, chancing, let's say, Kepa versus Wolves and him getting a start there makes a lot more sense than going for Steele. It's not like Mendy, if he gets to start ahead of Kepa, is going to get injured more than likely. So it makes sense to start with Kepa. Steele will come on if, let's say, there's already an immediate change in the order of the defense. As far as Trippier and Chilwell, these are two locks as well, simply because they have great fixtures and much more comparable. Yes, everyone's playing away, in this week, with the exception to Shaw, who likely isn't going to play. But simply put, both these players have great attacking ceilings. We saw Chilwell close to getting some attacking assists in Gameweek 29. I'm hoping that he can actually provide the goal that he was sort of denied in Gameweek 29 as well. So we'll see what happens there. But as far as the midfield, if we head on towards it, Mitoma, Maddison, Rashford, Fernandes are the players I'm going for. And you can notice as well that that's simply because I put McAllister on the bench. What concerns me about McAllister on the bench is of course, I am dropping a penalty taker for someone like Mitoma. The underlying stats have supported McAllister previous to that, but Mitoma has showcased a fine and fantastic finishing season so far, although we don't necessarily have enough sample size on Mitoma. However, I think a lot of us do prefer Mitoma a little bit on the eye just when it comes to being that lethal goal scorer and actually finishing his chances. But I think it's very close between the two. Probably a lot of managers will go for McAllister. I think the benefit of getting someone who actually has penalties is always going to be nice. But I'm still tempted to go with Mitoma first. And you might be looking at my team selection here and saying, why keep Fernandes if he's going to be playing defensive mid? At the end of the day, he's got chances of penalties as well, which compares very well to McAllister. And still, I think in that Everton game, even though Casemiro might not be back, and we might see once again Fernandes at DM, I still think that there's better chances for United to do well specifically because they're so much better of a home team. And we could see that in the game versus Brentford. They're much more able to control the game from a defensive point of view. But on the attack, yes, a little bit lacking in terms of edge. But I think it's going to be close between all these midfielders here, with exception to, of course, Maddison and Rashford, who I think clearly have great fixtures. And Rashford, of course, a captaincy contender. So those two options are really non-negotiable for me when it comes to starting. But this bench will probably hurt me this week somehow, even though my team's been already weakened by the Shaw injury. As far as the forwards, you know it already. I've booked the transfer towards Tony to Haaland in my mind a long time ago, and it still makes sense for me to go there, even though Tony got away with, without a yellow card effectively versus Man United. And the simple reality is, if I can get at least 45 minutes of Haaland, I think I'd prefer that to Tony. I don't think we're going to see that though. Of course, it's probably going to be either something like 25 minutes for him to get a little bit of game time before the Bayern Munich game, because he is coming from a groin injury and recovering from that. As far as when we talk about Haaland as well, there's a good chance that we might see him do 60 minutes, for example, where let's say if City are able to overwhelm Southampton, we get to see that quintessential early Erling sub at around 60-65 minutes. So I do think that Haaland will start based on the fact that he's already back in training, and the fact that he might have been considered for the Liverpool game, although him actually being out of the squad probably suggests that he wasn't as close as people thought. Haaland, though, is someone that I'm still tempted to go for. And I think that there's enough upside there in a week where Tony plays versus Newcastle. And that's simply what it comes down to. As far as Kane and Watkins, two fantastic options. And you might as well have noticed that I've gone for a captaincy over Rashford and a vice captaincy over Watkins. I might actually change my mind on captaincy. I don't think Kane is a particularly good captaincy option, so I'm not really considering him this week. But Maddison's interesting, Rashford's interesting, and Watkins is interesting. And of course, if you think we're going to get 60 to 90 minutes of Haaland, aka a confirmed start, then the captaincy could eventually move towards Haaland. But as of right now, I don't have enough information on that. We don't have a pep conference to really go by. So I do like the fact that Rashford is a great available captaincy option for now. And Watkins, for me, a close second. And this is going to be how I'm laying out the team for this week and how I plan to go out for Game Week 30, depending on, let's say, of course, the Shaw injury. So as I said, last thing would be just getting Botman in the team. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.